Philip, it's wonderful to have you on Floor Talk. Thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Judy.
It's a pleasure. So now, Philip, tell me, how does space domain awareness and Scout Space's in-space observation tech contribute to managing space traffic and enhancing security?
Scout's been out building the eyes and the brains of modern satellites. And if you take a step back and you think about where we came from, 20 years ago, space was populated, but not heavily. And we knew where things were. And we had an easy means to predict where things might be in the future. But today, we've seen a substantial growth in objects on orbit, and we haven't seen a dramatic increase in our ability to go sense where those things are. And today, we're also on track to having perhaps 100,000 satellites on orbit at some point in the near future. And the need to understand what's there, where things are going, what threats might exist is just increasing by the day. So we've been out building a family of solutions to go off and go provide both the ability to see what's there, process the data from those observations, and then make decisions about what's there. And we believe that by enabling the modern space operator to have that data layer, to go kind of understand their environment, make decisions on that data, everyone's going to be able to operate safer at scale and thereby enable all the good stuff that the modern space economy is going to create.
So now you have OWL, right? Tell me, how has OWL optical payload program driven your growth and positioned the company as a leader in the space industry?
Absolutely. So OWL's our flagship national security product. It's a dual-axis gimbaled optical telescope that does long-range detection. And it's just one marker of our focus on innovation and going after the hard problems in space. So OWL's been developed in part in cooperation with our US Space Force customers, and we're building it specifically to address emerging gaps in the space surveillance network. And that means that we're looking at putting OWL in, for instance, the geostationary belt to do observations to augment the sensors that are already there. And by doing that, we're doing some really interesting science. What we look at is really esoteric. We're trying to find really photons on focal plane arrays. So these end up being dots, streaks, or blobs that you see at extremely long distances, tens of thousands of kilometers. And by having more observations, more accurate observations of those dots and streaks at extremely long distances, it allows our Space Force customers to go off and go understand the operating environment in GEO better, and thereby bring down the risk for operations.
Now, as CEO, how do you identify and capitalize on market opportunities while fostering innovation and managing risks?
I'm a lawyer by trade, so it's not terribly traditional for an attorney to be running a space company, especially one without an engineering background. But it does give me a unique perspective on risk. And I think it's allowed me to lean a little bit forward in that respect, because I understand risk in a really detailed and nuanced way that a lot of founders or traditional startup leaders don't necessarily kind of come with intrinsically, right? They rely on outside counsel to give them that perspective. And traditionally, outside counsel is not going to give you necessarily a risk-forward understanding of things. So it allows me to go off and go think about, again, the hard problems. So we're building solutions for GEO, really leveraging that approach to GEO, which is a substantially harder technical problem than traditional new space entrants going after the low Earth orbit domain. Additionally, we've built a system and a process within the business to foster innovation. We've dedicated time and resources internally, communication structure, an update structure, and we've done all these things to go off and go make sure that our personnel understand that innovation is the key to what we're doing. So we're not thinking just about traditional space domain awareness, traditional space sensing. We're thinking about all of the what can we do's with it? What can we build off those data layers to go off and go create the next thing? And finally, towards that end, we're also doing some truly novel things. We're going to be flying a suborbital space plane to go do a novel VLEO observation mission towards the end of this year. And between all of these different things, some of the interesting algorithmic processing that we're developing, some of our national security sensing modalities, and our absolutely novel take on VLEO, I think fundamentally that sets us apart and allows us to lean into that risk to go try to solve hard and unique problems.
Finally, Philip, tell me, what emerging trends in the space industry excite you, and how is Scout Space positioned to capitalize on these while addressing space safety and sustainability?
Two trends here, I think, that are primarily driving where we see the future going. And one, unfortunately, is this incipient emergence of great power conflict again, right? We, for many years, got to operate on orbit with this sense that we could just do whatever we wanted with impunity. But the reality is Russia, China, others are starting to challenge our primacy on orbit. And fundamentally, that is it's not a good thing, but it is a reality of where we are. And space has been, since day one, a warfighting domain where commercial activity has just kind of been tolerated. But as the commercial opportunities begin to expand and scale and grow, and again, we're looking at these huge numbers of objects on orbit, we need to realistically ingest that fact. That is a reality, that there may be conflict, and we need to protect both our national security assets and our commercial infrastructure as well. So that's something that, of course, with our national security flagship product, OWL, we're well suited to do, to provide kind of domain awareness and self-maneuver, self-protect capabilities eventually to go off and go make sure that assets on orbit are protected or protectable. And then on the commercial side, we're also seeing a trend towards how do you enable scale, right? So when you're thinking about stuff in orbit today, conjunction, basically risk of collision between things on orbit, it's real. It's just going to get worse. And we're trying to figure out how that really can work when you're talking about 100,000 objects on orbit. And when we think about how to fix that, the logical solution is autonomy. But you can't have autonomy on orbit without understanding what's actually there, which means you have to have the ability to create the data layer. You have to understand what's there and process that data so that you can make decisions autonomously to maneuver your satellites or optimize your constellations on orbit. So we're seeing those two trends. One, the defense focus becoming more and more real day by day. And then, of course, the need for autonomy and the supportive data infrastructure to support autonomy being a necessary precondition for scaling on orbit.
Philip, all very fascinating. Very wonderful to talk with you. Thanks for joining me on Floor Talk today.
Thank you so much, Judy. I really appreciate it.